When I got home, Henry had packed a bag for me and left it on the doorstep. He said my mum called while I was out, and he knew I lied about meeting her. He said they had both agreed I should go back home to Kent for a while, until I stopped being delusional. He dropped me at the train station outside of Avis in Witney. He didn't even wait for the train to arrive, said he had work and would call me in a couple of days. I sat on the train platform and looked at the faces in the crowd. It was unusually busy and hectic. People shared a general expression of dread. The last train to London was at 8:52, and the clock was slowly creeping in that direction. Anyone who didn't push and shove their way onto the next train would be walking back to Avis after sundown, unless they wanted to sleep in the station. Now calling at platform 2 is the 8:52 train to London Paddington, calling at Oxford, Reading, London St Pancras and London Paddington. I watched the bedlam erupt as the doors opened. Then I walked into the train snack bar and bought a tea in a styrofoam cup to warm my hands on the long walk back to Avis. Once you got outside of the high street, it was basically one long stretch of road with no pavement and forest on either side until you reached the border of Avis, past the Weeping Lakes and into the town. There were no street lights, and I knew if a car came swerving around the corner at any time, I'd have to jump headfirst into the bushes or perish. But no cars would come. No one from Witney went to Avis, and no one from Avis would drive on this road at night. When Henry and I first left London for the country, I had believed all his bullshit about the quiet and the birds, that it would be good for me after all the stress of work. He didn't mention the constant conveyor belt of missing people on the news, or all the insane traditions to avoid bad luck. He calls me delusional, but won't go out if it rains, won't go out if it's dark, won't go out if it's the 1st of May. Walking back, I was too angry to notice the scurrying in the bushes. I felt comforted that the lack of light meant lack of shadows, and didn't know about the real tangible danger in the woods. I finished my tea and scrunched the cup into a ball that I put in my pocket. Then I picked up the pace with one thing on my mind. I was going to have it out with Henry. I was going to tell him all the things that he did that pissed me off that I never mentioned. Really go for the jugular, since he never had any qualms about going for mine. Then I was going to meet with the shadow box man and put to rest any doubts I had in my own experience. I knew what was going on in Avis, or at least I knew something was going on in Avis, and if I just went back to Kent to live with my parents, then I'd forever be the patient, the crazy yellow wallpaper lady who couldn't make it as an adult, lost her job, lost her husband, lost her mind. Suddenly I came back to myself as the headlights of a car lit up the path in the distance. Shadows that had been orbiting around me suddenly came into view, then darted in all directions as the light went off. The engine died and I heard the door open but saw nothing. The night was even darker now in the wake of the headlights. I felt only vaguely aware of where the car was parked and tried to walk around it when my arm was tightly gripped by a small hand with sharp biting nails. "Hello, Tulip. Are you lost?" I pulled my arm back and took a couple of steps backwards but hit something hard there too. "Not safe on the road at this time of night," came a gruff, unpleasant voice behind me. He too took my upper arms and started to lead me. Not in the direction of the car but into the woods. I felt the ground underneath my feet become less predictable than the straight flat road. I could hear the woman breathing somewhere nearby as we walked, and I said nothing. Too surprised to react in any useful way, no thoughts of screaming or running. I just walked and thought about how Henry would spin this to make me look crazy again. Finally I started to make out lights in the distance. So small I thought they were tea lights until we got closer. "We passed it, you ninny. It's right there," said the woman, and the man yanked me backwards again and pushed me against something hard. I struggled a little, but only as a reflex. My eyes were looking past the darkness of his shoulder to the lights flickering like candles on the lake. I knew this place. Henry had brought me here when we first moved to Avis, the Weeping Lakes. Plural because of a few puddles surrounding the much larger lake, hidden in the thick forest of brambles and vines. It looked different now, though, with the church half sunken and half revealed above its depths, candlelight flickering from behind the windows, the door ajar. "It's a sight to behold, isn't it, Tulip?" said the woman, and I finally looked away to the now slightly lit-up face of a thin, boyish woman. She looked vaguely familiar, and when her partner in crime stepped up behind her, I recognized them as the couple on the bench in the park where I met the shadow box man. They had looked kind then. "Are the ropes tight?" she asked, and I processed the digging into my flesh that held me tight to a large tree. I didn't say anything, and it seemed to irritate her. She took my chin in her cold hand and turned my face from side to side. "Not very pretty, are you?" she said. "She's not ugly either," replied the man, who had moved a little further away into the dark. "Do you think I'm pretty?" she asked, and got closer to my face, supposedly so that I could see hers. She had very dark eyes and pale skin. Her expression was one of anger, then suddenly interest, then boredom. "I have seen you before." "You ain't seen nothing yet, Tulip." The pain was delayed. It almost happened in slow motion. It was silent, not like in those horror films with the stabbing cabbages sound effect. It was just wet, a spreading wetness across my front and no pain at all. Then she started a back and forth motion with the knife that started the pain response. I screamed and she laughed. I heard the man laughing from the darkness and saw a little face peek around the door of the church. This woman was carving a hole. I thought I'd bleed out and die immediately, but I wasn't so lucky. I struggled, but that hurt. I screamed, but that didn't work. I knew only bad people were out in these woods at night. Bad people and crazy people like me. "Shush now, Tulip, you'll drown out the song," she said, pressing a bloody finger to my lips. "Listen," she whispered, and turned her eyes to the side, as if looking for the source of that dreadful sound. All sound was beginning to sound muffled. My extremities had started to feel numb, and the only sound I could hear was the echo of my own screams, although slightly off, like someone mimicking my voice and getting it wrong, trying again and again. "Beautiful," said the woman, before she ducked down out of view. I hung on the tree and stared at the flickering lights of the church windows. She hummed and seemed to be speaking to herself, maybe looking for something. "Who is that?" I asked, and she popped up to look at my face, then popped down again. I tried to turn my head to see into the darkness around me, to search out the source of that horrible sound. She came back into my blurred view, her eyes searching my neck and my ears. "Don't you wear any jewellery, Tulip?" She pulled at my collar, then rifled through my pockets before a gleeful exclamation of a "Ha!" She took my styrofoam cup ball out of my pocket and held it up to the light. "Did you put this in your mouth?" she said in a childish sing-song, and touched it to my lips before dropping back to the ground. That mimic screaming continued but was moving closer. The man came in and out of the light carrying wood, his own eyes shifting back and forth between the woman and the darkness. She was hunched over, her bony back raised and spine jutting out from pale flesh. She looked like a bird, pecking the ground for food, fluffing its feathers for intimidation. "Okay, finished," she said as she stood tall again and looked back into my eyes. She held it up for me to see. A strange little bird's nest made from twigs and dead leaves. In the centre, half an eggshell from some forest bird I'd never seen, purple like poison running through the shell like vines. Inside the half eggshell was my styrofoam cup, crunched into a ball. The woman looked from the nest to my eyes and back again what felt like 24 times. She wanted to see my reaction, maybe craved some compliment for her handiwork, but when I just stared blankly, she scrunched up her face and twisted her nose. She looked like an angry child on the brink of a tantrum. Pain like nothing I've felt before, like being touched inside, like stroking bones and pinching tendons. She was putting the nest inside the hole she had cut in my abdomen. The twigs were piercing me, thorns catching and tearing, leaves laying heavy where they should not be. "There's something wrong with this one, Freddie. She's dumb or something," said the woman. The shadows were starting to surround us now, like a congregation of that black church. They had never hurt me before, and they weren't hurting me now, just filling up my vision, filling in any tiny gaps where light might reside. Once the darkness came, it didn't leave again, but sounds remained. The screaming in the woods, the man and the woman speaking together, laughing and arguing, then a sort of wet slump and a thud and a dragging sound. I didn't feel the wet of the water when they threw me in, just heard the surface cover me like a blanket and drown out all other sound. Finally, quiet, and no light to make shadows with. What would Henry think of this?